Good day, my name is Christelle from Franz de Klerk, Independent Technical Analyst. Michael wanted us to look at the Rand. And his question was, why was the Rand not a lot weaker than what we see, when we see what is happening around us? So one thing we always remember, Michael, is when we look at the Rand and there is massive weakness or strength, we immediately go back to the US dollar and see if the dollar hasn't strengthened or weakened. And if it hasn't, then we know that it's the local news or the local circumstances that had an impact on the Rand. So let's just have a look at the USDZAR currency pair, or the Rand against the American dollar at the moment. I mean, on the week of the 7th of June, a beautiful bullish engulfing candle implied the first sign of weakness on the Rand when it closed at 13 Rand 68. Ever since then, higher lows were visible. A strong trend line, a horizontal trend line that I've drawn in there, is waiting at 1451. So why? Because this is the possible neckline or trend line that supports this small cup and handle formation. And we know that this is normally showing us that the instrument can move to higher levels, which means that means weakening of our Rand against the American dollar. But now let's have a look at what happened. And remember, these are weekly graphs, so this candle is not finished yet. It's in the making. Our high for this week on the Rand was 14 Rand 78 on the spot price. But you can see, based on that tail, that the Rand strengthened all the way back where it's currently trading at around 1456. The fact that the 40-week moving average, that red line, was tested and not changed into a support and traded below that and retraced from it is seen as negative. Why do I say that? Because that means this can be a technical goodbye case, saying that we can see possibly more strength in the Rand because it could not change that 40-week moving average into a support. If the Rand manages to close above that 40-week moving average, waiting at 1478, the long-term sentiment towards the Rand will change to a weaker Rand. And remember, we've spoken before about this massive head and shoulder formation on the Rand that can take it back to 9 Rand 40 should the full formation play out. Only when the Rand starts to consolidate above 1566 will the negativity around that head and shoulder formation be off the table and incomplete. So at the moment, we can see definitely weakness, we can see higher lows, but have a look at that 40-week moving average. That is your line in the sand, Michael, for long-term investors. So the question is, how can our Rand be so strong with everything happening? So we have to go back to the dollar index to see if the impact there is not maybe supporting our Rand at the moment. Because remember, if you buy dollars, you inevitably sell the Rands and vice versa. Whether you trade the future or you're buying the ETN, it's this expectation that you buy it with the idea that the Rand will weaken and therefore you will profit. But let's have a look at the dollar index. The dollar index is a basket that shows the dollar against other major currencies like Japanese yen, euro, the pound, etc. So at the moment, and let me just explain, if the dollar index rises, it means that the dollar is strengthening, which means then our Rand would probably weaken should all the other things remain the same. If the dollar index starts to retrace and pull back, that means the dollar is weakening, which means that our Rand would probably strengthen if everything remains the same. Have a look at our dollar index. We are sitting at the moment with a possible double bottom. But that level or that formation will only be confirmed when that strong resistance waiting at 93.43 change into a support. This is a turnaround formation, a double bottom, which means we can see a stronger dollar going forward should this formation play out. We are above the 40-week moving average, which tells me the long-term sentiment towards the dollar has changed to a stronger dollar. Let's have a look at what has happened the last 2 weeks. If I look at these two last candles on my dollar index, I can see that there has been resistance for 2 consecutive weeks at almost the same level, waiting there around 92.84. And this is after a rally in the instrument. These two consecutive candles with resistance at the same levels and the long tails at the top tells me that this might be a possible tweezer top. A tweezer top is a turnaround formation that tells me the end of the rally might come into play and that we might see more downside. In other words, a weaker dollar going forward. So the big question is, can the dollar go back to that resistance at 93.43, or is it going to lose steam here and starts to weaken? Because if the dollar continues to weaken, assuming it's not trading above these resistances anymore, the probability is there that our rand can continue to strengthen. So, Michael, I hope that answers your question, that if we look at the rand, we must always remember that it's not purely a South African-based, opinion of what the market thinks of our currency. It's also a matter of what is happening on the dollar and the impact thereof on our rand. Yes, the correlation is not 100%. I mean, if it's a 0.5% or 0.445% strength in the dollar, it doesn't mean our rand necessarily will have a 0.45% weakness. But the fact that they play against one another, that is definitely visible. Because sometimes nothing will happen. There's no local news out, but suddenly the rand strengthens or weakens. Then we always go back to the dollar index and say, hey, has the impact on the local rand not have been because of what has happened on the dollar index. But we are above the 40-week moving average already on the dollar index, which tells me stronger dollar. All right. Rian wanted us to look at Nampak. At the moment, we can see that Nampak, my internet is a little bit slow, just bear with me. I'm sure it's going to catch up. There you go. My stochastic, let's start there. My blue line has broken downwards through my orange line. We know that means a negative divergence. It's a pity that it's doing that in oversold levels, which makes it very negative, because oversold levels mean that the probability of the instrument to bounce to higher levels is more likely. Yes, the instrument can continue to retrace and remain under pressure even in oversold levels. There's no guarantee, but it makes the probability so much higher. So let's have a look at the Nampak graph. So we've previously spoken about this possible cup and handle formation. But if I move this line a little bit lower, we can also see that this might be a possible head and shoulder formation. If I start my left shoulder here in that week of the 30th of November, left shoulder, head, and a small right shoulder. More importantly, we are below that 40-week moving average, and that 40-week moving average is waiting at 2.39, which we know that means the long-term sentiment towards Nampak has changed to negative. So now the question is, Rian, the neckline of Nampak is waiting at 2 rand and 2 cent. Should that level change into a resistance, the warning of my head and shoulder formation will come into play, and let's be show the full, I almost wanted to say, let's be very negative here and show the full target of where Nampak can go to should the full formation play out. And how we determine that target, it is the length or the length of the head and shoulder projected downwards from the neckline where the formation will be confirmed, and that means it can possibly go back to 34 cents. Only if the head and shoulder or the instrument starts to trade above the left or the right shoulder, depending which one is the highest, 2.78, only above 2.78, can you take a sigh of relief and say, hey, the head and shoulder, the warning formation is now off the table. All right. But I know many investors want to make use of this opportunity of this possible cup and handle formation. So let's see if this instrument can bounce. Let's see if buyers can start to protect this share because of it being oversold. But I would say that neckline and especially that 40-week moving average waiting at 2.39 is your critical level that needs to start to change into a support. Maybe we can just discuss, logic will say, Christelle, it's at 2.12 cents. Why do I want to buy it at 2.39 higher than where it is currently? Remember, as technical analysts, we sometimes wait for a resistance to change into a support. We want to make sure that there is enough buyers and that there is enough stamina from the bottom to continue to support the share price. Because we know if there are no buyers, no matter how valuable a company is on paper, that share price won't rise. And the same applies to the sell side. If the sellers start to become powerful and they just keep on selling their stock, inevitably that share price will continue to retrace and decline, no matter how, what the news or what the financials of the company are saying. And that's why technical graphs are such a beautiful tool to use, because you can see what the informed capital think of the share and whether they are protecting it to buy for upside, higher lows, or are they starting to sell it because they are getting nervous for whatever reason. Lucky wanted us to look at the cryptocurrency pair LTC USD. Lucky, at the moment, we can see it is oversold. Look at that stochastic. And I'm using the stochastic just because it's a slower indicator. There are many you can use. Williams percentage R, a MACD, an RSI. It's entirely up to you. But I always use the stochastic. It's one of my favorites because, one, it's slow, so you won't get what I feel like whipsawed in and out all the time. But the confirmation of the stochastic is when that blue line breaks upwards through the orange line. Because once that happens, you've got a positive divergence, and that will show you that, hey, look at the candles, let's see if there will be optimism. So we can see the instrument stop making new lows, and that is positive. So your first sign of strength, or your first sign of confirmation of optimism, will be above 145, and that was last week's high. So the 40-week moving average is your next strong resistance that needs to change into a support in order to sustain the momentum to the top, and that is waiting at 160.17. Below these shadows, below the support there of 117.39 and below this low of 105, below those levels I would be concerned again, and will assume that the momentum to the bottom can continue and that we can even see lower levels. Let's just show or highlight a possible head and shoulder formation here, Lucky. I've got a left shoulder, massive head, and a right shoulder, and that right shoulder is still in the making. And when that neckline is waiting at 117.58, if that level changes into a resistance, that warning of this pair would be on the table, which means, inevitably, if I take this length of the full head, it will take this pair to zero. So let's see if that 40-week moving average can change into a support, and let's hope they keep the support at the bottom in place.